Okay, so can hear? Can hear? Okay, so last night we explained what is vipassana, what is vipassana meditation. So vipassana means this insight, clarity of mind that discerns clearly the true nature of reality, true nature of the five aggregates which are the constituent of our existence. So it discerns their true nature as impermanent, suffering, non-self. Then vipassana meditation is that meditation practice or development through which we cultivate and develop this vipassana insight. Okay. Now, but the next question: how does all this relate to the Buddha's teaching? So what does this vipassana meditation? What have they got to do with the Buddha's teaching? There are some who say that the Buddha did not teach vipassana meditation. So for them, it has totally nothing to do with the Buddha's teaching. But in fact, actually, vipassana meditation, it has everything to do with the Buddha's teaching, because vipassana meditation stands at the very heart or the core teachings of the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths. So today we'll explore into how this vipassana meditation fits into the Four Noble Truths. So Four Noble Truths is very important. It's the core teachings of the Buddha. So Buddha's message of liberation from suffering is encapsulated in this Four Noble Truths. You want to understand Buddha's teaching, you have to understand the Four Noble Truths clearly. Otherwise, a lot of wrong views may arise. So vipassana and vipassana meditation, they are in there somewhere. Maybe you cannot see yet. So now you say that vipassana means insight knowledge, the insight that discerns clearly nature of five aggregates as impermanent, as suffering, as non-self. So the five aggregates, in terms of the Four Noble Truths, the five aggregates, it is the first Noble Truth. First Noble Truth of suffering, dukkha ariya satcha. So in the, for example, the Dhammacakka Pavattana Sutta, the very first sutta that the Buddha taught to the Panchavaggiya Bhikkhu, the group of 5 monks. So in this sutta, the Buddha laid out the core teachings of all the Buddhas, the Four Noble Truths, including the Noble Eightfold Path. So in this sutta, Buddha talk about the Four Noble Truths. You define them. What are they? So how does he define the first Noble Truth? Idam kopana bhikkhave dukkam ariya satcham. Because this is the noble truth of suffering. So what is it? Jati piduka, jara piduka, vyadi piduko, maranam pidukam, piyahi sampayogo dukko, piyahi vipayogo dukko, yampi chana labati, tampi dukkam, sankitena panchupadana kanda dukkha. So it says jati piduka, birth is suffering. Jati, birth, is suffering. Jara piduka, aging, is suffering. Vyadi piduko, the sickness, is suffering. Then maranam pidukam, death is suffering. Apiyahi sampayogo dukkho. To come into, to be associated, to things that are not dear to you, things or person that is not dear to you, is suffering. Piyahi vipayogo dukkho, to be separated from things or people that you like, that is dear to you, that is also suffering. And yampi chana labati tampi dukkam, something that you desire, that you want, na labati, you cannot get it. That means frustrated desire. That also suffering. So up to this point, the Buddha is actually describing dukkha, suffering, in a way that most ordinary people can relate to. So you say birth is suffering, aging is suffering, sickness is suffering, death is suffering. People understand very easily. Okay? But actually, all this, birth, aging, sickness, and so on, actually they are referring to the 5 aggregates. So what is birth? Birth is a rising of the aggregates. So when you are born, what happened? Aggregates arise. When we say birth here, for human beings, birth is not, after 9 months in the womb and the baby come out. What we mean is a moment of conception. So at that time, the 5 aggregates arise. First, of course, as in the sutta, I say mother and father. What it means is the egg and the sperm come together, form the zygote, right? So there's already materiality there. But at that time, the consciousness have not descended yet, right? So at that time, if there is a being, a suitable being with certain type of karma, suitable to be reborn with these parents, then the consciousness will descend, because that being have this type of karma to be reborn with these parents in this condition. So the consciousness will descend. So at that time when the consciousness descend, then all the 5 aggregates will be present. So that is called birth. So birth is the arising of the aggregates. Why is aging? Aging is also the aging of the aggregates. So too, sickness is the sickness of the aggregate. Death is the death of the aggregate. When you say to be associated with things or people that not dear to you, what is that? What is those things or people that is not dear to you? And it's also aggregate, right? So and to be separated from things or people that are dear to you. And those are also aggregates, right? There's something that you want, you cannot get. What is that? They're also aggregate. Okay? So all these are aggregates, 5 aggregates. Okay? So therefore, finally, the Buddha says, Sankitena panchupadana khanda dukkha. Okay? So in short, or in brief, to summarize everything, panchupadana khanda dukkha, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging, liable to clinging, that these are dukkha. Okay? So what is the gist of the first noble truth? It's actually the 5 aggregates liable to clinging, panchupadana khanda. Okay? So and in vipassana meditation, yogis, you turn your attention to continuously note the 5 aggregates arising within the sense experience. You're noting this sense experience, moment to moment to moment, seeing, hearing, smelling, and so on. Right? So, so every moment when you note, you're noting the 5 aggregates. Right? Because the 5 aggregates arising every moment, seeing, hearing, and so on, as we explained the other day. Okay? So therefore, the truth of suffering, dukkha satya, it is the object of noting in vipassana meditation. Okay? So vipassana object. Usually we say, oh, I'm not rising, I'm not falling, I'm not sitting, touching, lifting, pushing, placing. Okay? But actually, vipassana object are not rising, falling, or sitting, touching, or lifting, pushing, placing. Vipassana object is the 5 aggregates. Okay? Or to make it simpler, just because the 5 aggregates, as we said, it can be reduced to just nama rupa dhamma, mental physical nature. Okay? So vipassana object is only 2, mental physical nature. Okay? So for example, if you're not rising, falling, right? In the beginning, when you're not rising, falling, your attention goes at first more towards the concepts of the rising, falling. It goes towards, you see the form, the shape of the abdomen or the chest, going up, going down, abdomen like a balloon, round like a balloon, or flat like a wall, and so on. It's the form and shape, concept of form and shape. Okay? You also discern the manner of movement. Okay? It's going up, going down. Some say it goes diagonally. Some say it go left, right. All types of patterns. Some even say like star. These are all concepts. Right? So also it goes fast, it goes slow, it's long, it's short. These are also concepts. Okay? So in the beginning, when you note, your attention fall more on the concepts. Okay? So these concepts, they are not yet the true vipassana object. Okay? So but you start with them first, because if a beginner come in and we instruct them, you note the mental physical nature, blur, I don't know what they are talking about. So we begin with something that everybody is familiar with, concept. So you say rising, falling. Okay, understand. So, but as you continue to note rising, falling, okay? So the noting mind develops, mindfulness develops, concentration develops. Okay? So gradually, concentration established, clarity of mind also develop. Okay? Then you slowly begin to discern first the wind element, right? So at first you just say, rising, falling, rising, falling. When your mind is clear enough, then you begin to discern. In rising, you feel the nature, the physical element. You feel the support, the pushing, the pressure, sometimes the tightness. So when it falls, you feel the wind element weakening, so it becomes loosen, so the support weaken, it becomes soft. So you begin to discern these elements. So this is rupa dhamma, material nature. So and if you develop further, when your mind becomes clearer still, at some point, as you are noting the material nature, pushing, pressing, you begin to notice also, even as you are noting, pushing, you notice the mind that is noting, the nature of noting, the sanya, noting, taking note. Okay. So, or sometimes yogis also noted, there's the knowing, there's the mind that knows, the pushing, there's knowing, pushing, knowing. They're always together. Okay? Object and the mind. Okay? So that means you begin to discern mental nature, nama dhamma. Okay? So it is when you can note or discern clearly this mental, physical nature behind the concepts. Then you have arrived at the true vipassana object. Okay? So this is what the first insight is. Nama rupa parichedanyana. Okay? So the first insight, you discern clearly every moment you note. There's just the object and the knowing, object and the knowing, object and the mind, object and the mind. Okay? Object is usually physical, the rising, falling. Okay? Although it can also be mental. So you're not wandering, then it's the mind noting the mind. Okay? So so in the first insight, the yogi can discern clearly with every noting as just mental, physical nature. That means the mind has got the vipassana object, the real vipassana object. Okay, so it shows that you're moving in the right direction in the development of vipassana. Because the first step to develop vipassana is you must get the vipassana object. Okay, you are still on the concept. No matter how long you note, you cannot develop vipassana. Okay, vipassana insight only arise if you note nama rupa. Okay. Okay. So the first insight is an important foundation insight. You cannot skip. Okay? So, because here's where you clearly discern the vipassana object, the mental, physical nature, what we call the paramatta dhamma, the ultimate realities. Okay? So in Vipassana meditation, we note, we train the mind to note, to meditate continuously on the 5 aggregates, which constitute the noble truth of suffering. Okay. So why do we not meditate continuously on the 5 aggregates? We do so in order to remove ignorance or avidya. Okay? Ignorance of what? Ignorance of the truth of suffering. Okay? So meditate on it in order to uncover the true nature of suffering in the aggregates. Okay? And see clearly that their nature is indeed suffering. Okay? To see clearly, idam dukkam ariya satyam. This is the noble truth of suffering. Okay? So, because if you do not note or meditate on these 5 aggregates, even though you experience these aggregates, because even if you don't meditate, you still experience the 5 aggregates. Every time you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, think, all these are the aggregates arising. Okay? But even though you experience, you only experience them superficially, on the surface. You do not note properly. Okay? So you only experience them on the surface, very superficial. You do not perceive true nature of the aggregates deeply. Okay? It's like you look, but you don't see it for what it really is, the nature of suffering. Okay? Because if you don't meditate, you don't note properly, then the mind, out of habit, this samsaric habit, the mind will fall under the influence, the sway of this avidya, ignorance, or moha, delusion. Actually, avidya and moha refers to the same mental state. So these are the mental state that conceal the true nature of the 5 aggregates. So they are like mental cataract that prevents you from seeing clearly. You have cataract in your eyes, you cannot see clearly. Everything blur. So you see a dog, you think it's a cat. So so similarly, when there's delusion, it's like mental cataract, prevent you from seeing the nature of the aggregates clearly, exactly as they are. So you're mistaken 5 aggregates, which nature is really impermanent, suffering, non-self. You take the aggregates to be permanent, to be pleasurable, to be the self. So for example, in your everyday life, when you're not meditating, you're not noting carefully moment to moment all the sense experiences that arise. So then as you go about your everyday life, so you're experiencing seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and so on. But as you are having all these sense experiences, when you're not meditating, you either consciously or unconsciously, you assume that there's this body and mind that is present right now, having all these experiences. And you think that this body and this mind that's present right now is the same body and the same mind that was present this morning. okay? Or yesterday, or the week before, or last month, or last year. You think it's the same, mind and body, since the day you are born. So I'm still the same person, you always say. So, and you also assume that come tomorrow, it will still be the same mind and body. Come next week, next month, next year, until the day you die, or even beyond that. Still the same body and mind. Okay, maybe not the body, but the mind. So you assume there's always this same body and mind present throughout your life, experiencing, seeing, hearing, smelling, and so on. Okay, so this is delusion of permanence. Okay, so. And we also take this body and mind to be a self, or something belonging to the self, property of a self. Okay? So for example, the body. So sometimes when you refer to yourself, you point to your body, this is me. Or you look in the mirror and say, oh, that's me, my beautiful self. So that means you're identifying with the body as the self. You're taking this body to be yourself. Okay? So sometimes you say, my hand, my foot, my face, my ear, my nose, and so on. Right? So in this case, you are taking the body to be property of a self. Something belonging to a self. Okay? You see, when they say Attavada, a doctrine of a self which the Buddha rejects. So Attavada does not teach just Atta. It teach both Atta and Attaniya. Atta means the self. Attaniya means property of a self, something belonging to the self. Okay? Both the Buddha rejected. Okay? For example, referring to the five aggregates, say the material aggregates, rupa. So he says, rupam bhikkhave sunyam, atenawa, ataniyenawa. Okay? Materiality, bhikkhus, is empty, sunya, empty. Empty of what? Empty of atenawa, empty of atta, self. And then ataniyewa, also empty of being a property of a self. Okay? So that means what it says, materiality is not the self, nor is it a property of a self. Okay? Same with feeling, with perception, with mental formation, mental activities, consciousness. All this, they are not self, nor are they property of a self. Okay? That's the meaning of sunya, empty. Say, sometimes you hear people talk about emptiness. Okay? So in Theravada Buddhism, when we say sunya, it means non-self, empty of a self, okay, or something belonging to a self. Okay, so okay, and not just the body. We also take the mind to be a self, or something belonging to a self. Okay, so when you say, I know, or I recognize, I feel happy, I feel sad, you're identifying with the mind as a self. You say, I know, you're identifying with the knowing, the citta, as a self. Okay, I recognize, I mean sanya, identifying with sanya, perception. It's perception that recognize. You take it as a self. You say, I feel happy, I feel sad. This Vedana. So, sometimes you say, my happiness, my sorrow. Nobody understand my sorrow. You're taking Vedana as the property of a self, belonging to a self. So we are constantly identifying the body and mind to be a self or a property of a self. So this is delusion of self. So in truth, what we call the self is actually a concept, an idea conceived by the mind, based on the 5 aggregates, based on the mistaken interpretation, you can say, of the experience of the 5 aggregates. So it's only the self is only an illusion, cooked up by the mind. So as a yogi, if you note your continuous sense experience carefully, when you have developed sufficient clarity of mind, all you see when you are noting is only momentary mental physical nature, fleeting in and out of existence, moment to moment to moment. So they arise, this mental physical nature, they arise with suitable conditions. The moment they arise, they disappear immediately. It does not last. So you keep noting a sense experience like this again and again, and you see it's just mental physical nature arising, disappearing, moment to moment. So you see there's nothing permanent in our experience that can be grasped at as a self or as something belonging to a self. So this is what the yogi can experience clearly. If you have developed sufficient mindfulness, concentration, and clear knowledge. So, but if you are not meditating, the mind will come under the influence of this delusion or ignorance. So this mental cataract that distort your vision of reality. So you cannot discern clearly this nature of non-self. Because you cannot discern clearly this mental physical nature, momentarily arising, disappearing, moment to moment. So so when you cannot discern how they are momentarily arising, disappearing every moment, then this mental physical nature appears continuous, unchanging. So you see it as the same body, it's the same mind all the time. So when you're not rising, falling, you're noting it's not clear, you think it's the same abdomen that's rising, the same abdomen that's falling throughout the day. Same abdomen must be very tiring, up down whole day. So all you see is just continuous, unchanging. So continuity of this mental physical nature, and then you grasp at this continuity of this mental physical nature. You grasp at it as one whole, solid, unchanging entity. And you identify this entity as yourself, or something belonging to a self. Right? So, so in effect, you are grasping at a non-existent self, okay? Due to this delusion of a self. Okay? And then everything that you experience, all your experience revolves around the self. I see, I hear, I smell, and so on. There's this I, which gradually also develop into ego. So, because when all your experiences revolves around the self, the idea of a self, then you invest into this non-existent self-identity. Example, you invest it with craving, with attachment, with desire. I love this, I like that, I want to enjoy that. So, I don't like this, I don't like that. So this I. So you also invest with this ego conceit. So I'm very powerful, I'm very clever, I'm very knowledgeable, I'm a very experienced yogi, I'm a super yogi. They puff up the ego. So and when the so-called self got frustrated, the ego got wounded, then you invest it with anger, with frustration. I'm so angry, I'm so frustrated. So all this I is due to self-delusion. Now, besides wrongly taking or assuming the five aggregates to be the self or the property of a self, we also enjoy the aggregates. How do you enjoy the aggregates? You enjoy seeing, you enjoy smelling, tasting, hearing, and so on, right? So these are our enjoyment of the aggregates. Okay, and for most people in the world, for them, this is the highest form of happiness. They do not know any form of happiness higher than this enjoyment of the sense pleasures. Right? So their whole life, because that's the only thing they know how to enjoy. So whole life, they keep seeking out one after another sense pleasure to enjoy. So even though they get frustrated again and again, because the nature of these sense pleasures and these aggregates, they're impermanent, right? You enjoy for a while, then it's gone, right? So maybe you like durian, or yesterday maybe you eat durian. Where is the taste of the durian? Where is the enjoyment of the durian now? It's gone, finish. Okay, so whatever you enjoy will disappear. Okay, has there been anything that you have enjoyed in this life that has not disappeared? Everything will disappear. If it has not disappeared, it will sooner or later. So So enjoyment of sense pleasure. Okay, so at the end of the day, it disappears. Okay, so when it disappears, you are frustrated. Okay, it leaves you feeling empty. It's like there's emptiness in your heart. Then you have to fill in the hole, the emptiness there. How? The only way you know, more sense pleasure. Keep filling it up again and again. It's like filling a void. Okay, filling the vacuum of space. Can never be filled. Okay, so at the end of the day, if you leave you feeling empty, okay, but still, you see, most people still keep seeking. Okay, because that's the only enjoyment, the highest enjoyment they know. Okay, so they keep seeking, more seeing, more hearing, more smelling, and so on. So enjoy continuously. Okay, so often with the belief that once I find this next thing, next enjoyment, I'll be satisfied. I will live happily ever after. The fairy tale. Okay, so but actually, deep in our heart, all of us know. Okay, there's no such thing as living happily ever after. So, but you tell this to most people, they cannot accept. Because that's the only way they know how to enjoy. Okay? So they continue to seek. So seek until the day they die. Still seeking, not satisfied yet. Then, not satisfied. I want to go on existing in some heaven to enjoy myself eternally. This craving for existence. So, so all this is due to this delusion of happiness, thinking that 5 aggregates can bring us true happiness. So, but it's impermanent, and nothing that is impermanent can give you eternal lasting happiness. Okay? It only bring you repeated frustration. Okay? So, but because due to this ignorance, not seeing clearly, taking what is impermanent, suffering, non-self, as permanent, as pleasurable, as a self. So you see as permanent, pleasurable, as a self, you see as something good, wonderful, something good to have. Okay? So then what happened? You develop desire, yearning, craving, attachment to them. You want to delight in them, you want to experience them more and more. Okay? So attachment, craving, yearning arise. Okay? So this is called dukkha samudaya satcha, the truth of the cause of suffering. Okay? This attachment, this craving. So 3 types of craving Buddha mentioned. Okay? So the noble truth of the cause of suffering. Yayam tanha pono bhavika nandiraga sahagata tatra binandini seati idam kama tanha bhava tanha vibhava tanha. Okay, it's a noble truth of cause of suffering. Is this craving that leads to rebirth, ponobhavika, that's accompanied by delight and attachment. Okay? tatra tatra binandin, that takes delight here and there, in this existence, in that existence, it delight here, delight there. So sayati idam, that is to say, kama tanha, the craving for sensual pleasures. Okay? So craving for sensual pleasures, craving for seeing, to enjoy seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking. Enjoy thinking also. Enjoy thinking about all the wonderful ideas. You delight in it. Thinking about the past memories. So that's kama tanha. Okay. Then bhava tanha. Bhava tanha is a craving for existence. Actually, what it means is craving that to go on existing eternally, in order to enjoy sense pleasures. Okay. Commentary explain it as the craving accompanied by the sasata ditti, the wrong view of eternalism, a view that the self goes on existing eternally. Okay. So what it means is you want to go on existing eternally, to enjoy. Even after death, you still want to go on existing in order to enjoy. That's what it means, craving for existence. And then vibhava tanha. This one they often translate as craving for non-existence. But this may be misleading. Okay. So what it means is the commentary explain as craving that arise together with the ucheda ditti, the wrong view of annihilation. Okay? This is the view that everything comes to an end with death. After death, nothing exists. Everything is annihilated. That means the self is annihilated. Okay? So those who hold to such a view, usually the materialists. Okay? So those who have the view that existence is basically material, that mind doesn't exist. They say mind is like nowadays many of the present day scientists, because in modern science they study only material, not the mind. Mind is not really acknowledged in modern science. Okay. So physics, they only study physical qualities, physical nature. So biology also just this physical body. Chemistry is also material. See. So for them, you ask them what is the consciousness? It's the the product of the material brain. So it's not real, you see. So for them, existence is material. Okay. So because it's material, so once this body die, and that's the end. That's a view of annihilation. Okay. So they identify the body as a self. Okay. So once you die, the self disappear, annihilated. Okay. So when you have such view, you may think, oh, since everything will end with death, I better enjoy myself right now, as much as I can. Okay? Don't worry about spiritual practice. That one nonsense. After death, all gone. What for? So they enjoy. This is called vibhava tanha, the so-called craving for non-existence. Okay. So I think it's more correct to say craving due to believing that everything will come to non-existence, something like that. Very long, but that's what it means. Okay. So this three is this three type of craving. Kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha. They are the truth of suffering, origin of suffering. Okay. Hmm. So either way, you want to enjoy the five aggregates. Huh? Whether kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha. Yeah? Means you want to enjoy the five aggregates because you take them to be permanent, pleasurable self. Okay? So because you want to enjoy, you want to seek out more and more to enjoy. That means you cannot just sit there and do nothing. Right? You sit there, do nothing, you got nothing to enjoy. You have to act. You have to work. Huh? So action or work is what we call karma. That means you get involved in karma. Okay? Whether wholesome karma or unwholesome karma. You want to enjoy, you have to do something. Okay? And you are wise, you perform wholesome karma. You do dana, you observe sila, you practice meditation, you purify the mind, and so on. Okay? You do all the 10 kusala karma. Then you create wholesome karma. Then you get, as a result of it, you can enjoy. But if you do not have the guidance of the Dhamma, so outside of the Buddha Sasana, there's no guidance of the Dhamma from the Buddha. Even right now, within present Buddha Sasana, so many people do not have the guidance of the Dhamma. So without guidance of the Dhamma, so you may perform akusala karma in order to enjoy. You kill, you steal, you cheat, you lie, and so on. So you get involved with karma, wholesome or unwholesome. Okay? But regardless of whether you perform wholesome karma or unwholesome karma, karma will lead to rebirth. Okay? And as karma at the end of life, when you're about to pass away, so as long as there's still this craving for existence, to go on enjoying, then this, because of this craving, okay, in the last thought process, you recollect one of the karma that you have performed in the past. Okay, so you appear to your mind as either the action itself, the karma itself, you recollect it, or a sign of the karma. That means something related to the karma you have performed. So you recollect the karma of doing dana, then you may see the alms bowl, or the robes that you offer, or the monks that you offered it to. These are called signs of karma. If a butcher recollect his killing, then he see the knife, or he see all the pigs that he has killed, or all the cries from the animals. So they are a sign of karma. Or you recollect a sign of destiny. That means where this karma will lead you to be reborn. So if you see a big mansion, very nice, beautiful, maybe in the clouds, maybe you'll be reborn as a deva. If you see forest, jalan, animal in the forest. If you see fire, even worse. This is a sign of destiny. Okay, so so at the last thought process, the mind will recollect this. So at that time, the force of craving will latch on to this karma, and then together the force of karma and the force of this craving for existence, supported by ignorance behind. Ignorance, only with ignorance you will take rebirth. Without ignorance, you see, this is suffering. Immediately parinibbana, like the arahants. No? Arahants, they don't see this as no more craving for existence, no more ignorance. They see this as just dukkha. Okay? So that's why they don't take rebirth. Okay? So, by ordinary being, this will happen. Okay? The craving for existence, the karma come together, right? Supported by the ignorance. Then this force, the cause, after the last consciousness disappear in this life, the next consciousness, next aggregates will arise in a new existence, okay, due to the force of the karma and the craving for existence. Okay, so we call this rebirth. Okay, so when there's karma, there'll be rebirth. Okay, so and once there's rebirth, there'll be aging. When does aging begins? You know, as soon as you're born, aging already begun. Aggregates keep changing, right? That's aging. Okay, so once there's rebirth, there'll be aging. There'll be falling sick, disease, sickness. There'll be death. Okay, and there'll be all this other suffering, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, despair, soka, parideva, dukkha, domanassa. All this will arise. Okay, so this is the process of dependent origination. Okay, I'm actually talking about the process of dependent origination, but in very, very concise explanation. I'm not going through all the links. Okay? So, that's dependent origination from ignorance, then there's craving, grasping, attachment, then there's karma, sankhara, karma bhava, then there's birth, jati, then jara, maranam, so aging and death, soka, parideva, dukkha, domanassa, upayasa, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, despair. Okay? All this arise. This whole mess of suffering arise. Okay? So with birth there'll be aging, there'll be disease, death, and so on. Okay? But death is not the end of it. Okay? As long as there's still craving for existing, wish to go on existing, to enjoy. Okay? Then what happened? Another birth. Okay? Because there are so many karma waiting to produce rebirth. Okay? So as long as there's craving for existence, so again the whole process of rebirth happen again. So another birth. Another birth means again birth, aging, disease, death. Okay? And then again birth, aging, disease, death. Again and again and again. This cycle after cycle of suffering. Okay? This samsara. Okay? So never ending dukkha. It goes on and on and on. As long as avijja, tanha, upadana, this ignorance, this craving, this grasping is still there, driving this process of dependent origination. It will go on, never ending. One cycle after another of suffering, birth, aging, disease, death. Okay, so some say, but Bhante, there's happiness also lah. So in between, yes, in your life there's happiness. You go kai holiday, wonderful, enjoy yourself, look see. Then you come back, you work, your boss scold you. That's the end of your happiness, right? Yes, that's happiness, but this happiness also impermanent. It's unreliable, it's insecure, it's dukkha. Okay? Finally, it also disappears. Okay? So this craving, it perpetuates, it keeps the cycle of suffering going on and on and on. Okay, that's why it's called the truth of cause of suffering. Dukkha samudaya ariya satya, the noble truth of the origin of suffering. Okay? So in the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha only point to this craving as the cause of suffering. Okay? But actually, when the Buddha elaborate on the Four Noble Truths, what you get is dependent origination, the 12 links. So, dependent origination, you see, there's the order of arising, right? So, avijja pacaya sankhara, sankhara pacaya vijnana, vijnana pacaya nama rupa, and so on, right? With ignorance as a condition, as volitional formation. With volitional formation as a condition, there is consciousness. Consciousness as a condition, there is nama rupa, and so on. This order of arising. This order of arising is an elaboration of the first two noble truths. Okay, truth of suffering and the cause of suffering. Okay, so when you elaborate on it, it's not just craving, it's ignorance, craving, and grasping. Okay, so grasping is this upadana. It's not just craving. Craving is a form of grasping. When the craving become intense, it becomes strong attachment, upadana. But you can attach or grasp through craving, as well as also through wrong views. Okay, so wrong view of self, you can get attached to it, attached to the self. Okay, that is also upadana. Okay, so these three, avijja, ignorance. Ignorance means ignorant of the Four Noble Truths, especially of the first noble truth. Not knowing five aggregates is in fact suffering, impermanent suffering, non-self. Okay, so also ignorant that of the fact that it is this craving that is driving this suffering, the process of suffering on and on through many existence. Okay, ignorant of the cessation of suffering, because you haven't experienced nibbana yet, so you're ignorant. Okay, so you have not awakened to it. Okay, so that's the meaning of enlightenment, awakening body. You awaken to the Four Noble Truths. Okay, when you attain enlightenment, you experience nibbana, then you awaken. Okay, because now you are not ignorant of the cessation of suffering. You experience it. Okay, when you experience it, you understand completely the truth of suffering. Okay, so because you have developed vipassana, you have seen this nature, anicca, dukkha, anatta, clearly. Okay, so at the moment of awakening, you have fully understood this is suffering. Okay, and you abandon when you experience nibbana. Okay, in that moment, you abandon the cause of suffering. Okay, so you awaken. Okay, and then the fourth noble truth. Okay, the path is fully developed at the moment of enlightenment. Okay, so. So when you elaborate the first two noble truths, you get the dependent origination, in the order of arising. Okay, and when you elaborate the third and the fourth noble truth, the cause of suffering and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Okay, that is when you experience the order of cessation. Okay, order of cessation describe both the third and the fourth noble truth. Okay, because that is what is experienced when you develop the Noble Eightfold Path. Okay, so the cessation of ignorance brings about the cessation of volitional formation and so on. Okay, so it's like it dismantles the entire round of rebirth. Okay, and actually this takes place not just at the moment of awakening, even as you are developing insight, it's already happening. So when you develop vipassana, the insight, you discern anicca, dukkha, anatta again and again. You note the five aggregates, you see their nature clearly, impermanent, suffering, non-self. It's discerning again and again. Okay, so this wisdom arises, this clarity of mind arises. So you see again and again, it's impermanent, suffering, non-self. Okay, so at that time, so in a sense you're already not fully awakened, but you're gradually awakening to the truth of suffering. You're seeing it more and more clearly. Okay, so and when you see anicca, dukkha, anatta, in that moment when this insight arises, in that moment there cannot be any attachment, any craving for that experience of the five aggregates. Okay, so in that moment you already abandon. Okay, but only in that moment when you note. Okay, vipassana, you awaken only when you note. You don't note, you go back to sleep. So in that moment, if you note, you see anicca, dukkha, anatta. In that moment, the attachment is abandoned. Okay, the cause of suffering is abandoned in that moment. Okay, so and when the insight is strong, so the mind actually inclines towards cessation of dukkha. Okay, so so especially the stages of dukkha jnana. Okay, so when the yogis discern very clearly the nature of suffering, especially this munchintu kamnyata jnana, knowledge of desire for deliverance, for freedom. So that stage the yogis see so clearly the oppressive nature of the aggregates. Again and again you see dukkha, dukkha, oppressive, keep arising, disappearing, breaking up, disappearing again and again. It's like death again and again, being cut off. Your existence is like being ripped apart again and again. So it's very oppressive. You see until you cannot tahan anymore. Your desire for liberation very strong. Okay, at that time the mind inclines very strongly towards the cessation of this process. Okay, so you mature by stepping up effort, by noting even more clearly. There's patisankha jnana, knowledge of re-observation. So by doing so, you mature the insight further, incline even more strongly towards cessation. Okay, so so you're again gradually inclining towards the third noble truth, the cessation. Okay? Actually, you see the four noble truth there is what we call Kicca or Kicca knowledge of the function. Each of the Four Noble Truths has a function. So the first Noble Truth, Buddha says, Tam Kopanidam Dukkham Ariya Satyam Parineyam. This Noble Truth of suffering is to be fully understood. Okay, it must be fully understood. Okay, and this is what we are doing in Vipassana, by noting its nature clearly again and again, seeing its nature, impermanent, suffering, non-self, again and again. We are developing a full understanding of the nature of the five aggregates, the truth of suffering. Okay, and the second noble truth, is that Buddha says, Tam Kopanidam Dukkha Samudayam Ariya Satyam Pahataban. This noble truth of the origin of suffering must be abandoned. Should be abandoned. That means eradicated. Okay, and this is what you do in Vipassana also. Every moment where you see clearly impermanent, suffering, non-self, in that moment it's being abandoned. Okay, craving cannot arise in that moment. Okay. And then the third noble truth is function. So Tam Kopanidam Dukkha Nirodham Ariya Satyam Sachikatabam. The noble truth of cessation of suffering must be realized. Okay, Nibbana must be realized, must be experienced. Okay, so now in Vipassana we do not experience Nibbana, but the mind is inclining, and the insight is strong, at the stage of powerful insight, Balava Vipassana. Okay? The mind is strongly inclining towards Nibbana. Okay? It's searching for a way out of this process of suffering. Okay? So it's inclining towards cessation. The stronger the insight, the more it inclines towards the cessation of suffering. Okay? This is one of the function of Vipassana. Okay? To incline towards cessation. Okay? And then the fourth noble truth, the path. Okay? The function is Bhavetabam, Tam Kopanidam Dukkha Nirodha Gamini Patipada Ariya Satyam Bhavetabam. Okay? The noble truth of the path that leads to cessation of suffering must be developed. Okay? So when you are practicing Vipassana, you are developing insight. You are actually developing the Noble Eightfold Path. Okay? So, no, but it is not yet the real Noble Eightfold Path. Okay? Vipassana is Magga, okay? But it's not Ariya Magga, not the Noble Path yet. The fourth Noble Truth actually refers to the true Noble Path. Okay? The Noble Path that arises at the moment of Magga, awakening. Okay? When the mind takes Nibbana as an object. Okay? That is the real Noble Eightfold Path. Okay? And it arises only in a single moment. Okay? That's why it's called the path that leads to cessation of suffering. It means these 8 factors of the path. The right view, right thought, right speech, right action, and so on. When they arise, these are all mental states. So at the culmination of the practice, these 8 mental states arise together. And in that moment, they turn the mind to the experience of Nibbana. Okay? That's why they say the path that leads to the cessation of suffering. Because it leads the mind to experience Nibbana, the cessation of suffering. Okay? But Vipassana is not called Ariya Magga. Okay, it's not the noble path, but it is called the Pubbabhaga Magga. Or the Pubbabhaga Magga means the preliminary path. Okay, because it serves development of vipassana, serve as the preliminary work that must be carried out before the real noble path arise. Okay, so before a noble path can arise to experience nibbana, you have to do the groundwork, the preliminary work. Right? The preliminary work is the development of insight, insight into the nature of the first noble truth, nature of impermanent suffering non-self. Okay, so so when you are developing vipassana, so this insight incline the mind strongly towards the cessation. Okay, the mind begin to let go of that craving. Okay, so as the mind will let go more and more, it inclines more and more towards freedom from this process of suffering. Okay, so when the insight becomes fully mature, okay, then Magga-jnana arise. So Magga-jnana, at that time, that is the time awakening. Okay, so that is when, because the insight is fully mature, in that moment Magga-jnana arise, and path knowledge arise. The mind completely abandon the cause of suffering. Okay, and vipassana is not complete yet. Okay, but when the magga arise, it completely let go, cut off the cause of suffering, the craving, cut off in such a way that it no longer can arise. Okay, so and in that moment, you actually experience the cessation of suffering. So the function of the third truth is completed. Okay, and then the eightfold path is fully developed. Okay, during vipassana is not fully developed yet. Okay, and now the eightfold path is fully developed. Okay, so that is the moment when awaken to the Four Noble Truths. Okay, so the mind is freed from suffering. Okay, so you can see from all this discussion that vipassana and vipassana meditation, they are at the very heart of the Four Noble Truths. Okay, so it is what brings the Four Noble Truths into the real practice. Okay, when you say Four Noble Truths, you read in the sutta, it's just theory. Okay, so what brings about the real experience, the awakening to the Four Noble Truths? Vipassana meditation, by developing vipassana. Okay, because it's the preliminary work that you must do in order to awaken to the Four Noble Truths. Okay, to have a true experience of the Four Noble Truths. Okay, so vipassana is right at the very core of the Buddha's teaching. Okay, of the Four Noble Truths. Okay, we stop here today.